Okay, guys, I think we're going to get started. We have some people that are running a little late and some that have joined us, so we're going to go ahead and get started at this point. Again, my name is Brendan McCauley, and I'm joined today as well by Dan Gerena, who is our product manager. We are FTI Catalyst, and we supply healthcare analytics to your industry. So thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today. One of the things we're looking to do today is to provide education as well as provide learning about software and to provide insights into your business. And I always find HFMA to be a very powerful place to get great information. And like many of you who attend, one of the quotes recently from the HFMA Value Project I think is worth repeating. The CEO of HFMA said something pretty interesting that got a lot of responses, and you can find this online, but mentioning that there's a need to develop principles around costing and costing data to assist providers in the transition towards a value-based business model. And, you know, value is something that's pretty hard to put into a tangible way to look at anything, especially hospital medicine. You know, one time many years ago, I was at a trade show in Las Vegas when I was back in the EMR business. And I was sitting down on a very hot day, and the air conditioning was on, and it was thankfully very cool inside. And I was speaking with an executive, a hospital director, who said to me, Brendan, there's three certainties in life: death, taxes, and mandatory EMR by 2014. And I nearly flipped over because I thought this is the Wild West, but it was becoming very clear that, and his murmurs were that CMS, the government, payers are starting to watch how you can report on data and prove things like value, cost effectiveness, and quality. So if you're intrigued by this conversation and you can kind of hang your head out there outside out of the typical world for just a few minutes and hang with me for a couple seconds, let's look at some things that are hard to gauge on the value scale. And since it's the holidays, you know, price of a gift versus value of a gift. Very down here in the low left-hand corner, advice from mother-in-law is looked at as not too valuable, whereas a $500 donation is even less valuable. You know, someone gives you a $500 donation in your name to a cause. It seems like the $20 Starbucks gift card seems to hit the value proposition pretty nicely. And in your business, there's been a value equation for some time now that talks about quality divided by cost minus risk. And falling within this spectrum is something that has been important to the hospital business and healthcare delivery system for a number of years. But the clear problem is there is not an equation of this line that is a roadmap that gets you to this spectrum on this graph to provide the type of value that you're looking to provide. So what we're trying to help you do today, if you can hang with me for just a couple more minutes as we kind of get out there before we center it back to FTI Catalyst and data management. Equations exist everywhere, and an equation for water is a balanced one, and an equation refers to it equals something, right? And water obviously is extremely valuable, but we even still want quality water, don't we? We want Perrier or something carbonated or something in a bottle, and going after water, which is already a very strong value proposition, we all still want the best quality. So if we're willing to hang with those principles for just a few minutes, let's look at what a roadmap or an equation for value might look like on a balanced and data-driven value proposition for healthcare. And what you're going to see today is ultimately what's called a balanced scorecard approach. But we want to try to show today that payer and contract negotiations, as well as staffing and productivity analysis, which in some ways hinges on understanding variances and outliers and core drivers of case margins, as well as alignment of physicians on variable costs, can result in accountability, value, cost effectiveness, capital recovery, and equality. Now, unlike water, we can't necessarily make it rain, but we try to make it rain thumbs up in some degree. And this is an international phenomenon of patients searching out value and quality. And this article happens to be from Australia, just to show you the lengths and distances people are willing to go. This is actually a Continuum Healthcare company, which is a United States-based company. But it's showing you the patients want this too. A good experience, a valuable experience, and I know that you're interested in delivering that. And what we want to really put into perspective today is that your data can drive your value proposition. And the balanced scorecards that we espouse and the way that we espouse analyzing data is to look at these areas: finance, operations, quality, staffing, the ED, productivity, i.e. nurse ratios and staffing ratios, and also core measures. And it's our belief that if you are willing to dote on these areas within your hospital, that you will be able to achieve, for your patient's sake and your payers, the government, CMS, whomever's interested, you'll be able to achieve the value proposition that you have in mind by understanding diverse and currently segregated and siloed data sets. Because value and quality and cost effectiveness at the end of the day is something that only data can show. And therefore it's valuable to look at data as money, basically, as a way to prove that you're doing what you say you're doing and to underscore with your payers your value proposition. What we want to try to also do for you today is bear upon you the importance of bringing the data under one roof. So when you look at sources like flat files, your mainframe system, your ERP system, EMR, all the different systems you might have. You might have Press-Ganey for patient satisfaction. You might have Midas. You might have social workers and care coordinators using one system. You might have in the OR using another for some sort of resource utilization analysis. We want to take all those disparate source systems and provide an integration for you and store that data into a data warehouse from which our data model sits on top and offers reporting. And this can be done on the cloud, or this can also be done right within your data center. So now I want to introduce Dan Gerena, who is our product manager and has been heavily involved in stewarding this system since its inception. So with that, I'll introduce Dan Gerena. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Brendan. So I'm going to share my desktop and walk through a couple of slides here. I believe you can see me, correct? Can you see me, Brendan, on screen?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Dan Gerena. I headed up a... go ahead, Brendan.
I see your slide. I see the old desktop. I don't see your current slide, actually.
Oh, you don't? Okay, let's see.
We see a picture of you.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
That's what you should see. Okay.
Okay.
So, Brendan, you don't see the picture of me on?
I'll get you. Don't worry about it. I got it.
You got it? Okay.
Yeah, we assume it's you.
Okay, great. Yeah, if you see a handsome gentleman, that's probably me then. Okay. So, prior to joining FTI and starting up a team here at FTI, I was Director of Business Intelligence and Analytics for 13 years at a 5-hospital healthcare system in Buffalo, New York. So all day, every day, what I and my team were accountable for was really helping steward the process by which we took data that you have in the course of managing patients and billing patients and treating patients, the data that you already possess, how do we make effective use of that? So that was my role for a 13-year period, and we first started out with financial metrics because at the time we were losing money, and so naturally that's the place to start. And then as we turned around our financial ship, we started looking at patient and operational metrics such as length of stay, discharge management. Then we started looking at staff management. In our particular environment in Buffalo, for instance, we have a shrinking labor force and aging labor force. So, we started focusing on retention of certain critical positions like physicians and nurses, things of that nature. And so over the course of that 13-year period, really, we went from soup to nuts to having a very robust and broad and deep balanced scorecard approach. So I brought that expertise and knowledge with me to FTI and developed a team that essentially replicated what we did where I used to work. And so instead of, starting from scratch, which is what a lot of folks do in healthcare organizations, there are very essential metrics that you need access to in the short term, and it doesn't really make sense to reinvent the wheel and start from scratch because it's a very iterative process. And people like me with MBAs and who have expertise in not only understanding how healthcare fundamentally works, but also have coding experience, et cetera, we're expensive. So to start that process and do an 8-year journey, 9-year journey, it really doesn't make sense for a lot of organizations if you can leverage someone else's expertise. So that's really what the Catalyst product represents, is a culmination of all that expertise and a marriage of not only the expertise from a healthcare perspective, but also from a technical perspective. So it's sort of the marriage of those two. So Catalyst essentially is, I'll try to explain it conceptually, and then I'll show you in a demo, sort of a hands-on look at the tool set. But conceptually, you have all these disparate systems, and they all contain really valuable information. So every time you register a patient, you know where they live, you know their age, whether or not they're a smoker or a non-smoker. You know who the attending physician is, the referring physician, the surgeon if a procedure is performed, the admit and discharge date. You know a lot of information about your patient population, what procedures are done, what charges and supplies are utilized in that encounter. A lot of information in terms of financial metrics, who the payer is, what's the DRG if it's an inpatient, and what's the case mix acuity. So in the course of doing your day-to-day business, you're capturing a lot of information that allows you to circle back to what Brendan was talking about, to understand from a balance perspective where you have opportunities from a financial perspective as well as a quality perspective, and where you have opportunities to manage resources more effectively, whether those resources are labor or materials and supplies. So you all have your respective disparate systems. What we do is we work with you to understand what your source systems of record are, and we map your data to our predefined data model. So we have, again, I did this for 13 years, so when you start this process, you iteratively, it's a very iterative process when you start from scratch. You say, I know I need these attributes, and then someone asks you for something else, and someone asks you for something else. So over time, you find yourself adding additional attributes, et cetera. We've already gone through that process where I used to work and where we've implemented this tool set to sort of refine exactly what we need to capture and what that data model should contain. So we have a predefined data model, and on top of that predefined data model, we have a pre-built set of dashboards. So instead of going from A to Z in terms of implementing all of your dashboard solutions, we're really just going from A to D, and D being, migrating your data from where it lives today to our data model. Everything else is built. So conceptually, that's what Catalyst represents. It's a predefined data model and a pre-built set of dashboards. And the beauty of that, though, is when we deploy and implement at your site, you can amend and change and modify that data model and change and customize the dashboards and add your own dashboards to your heart's content, because we realize that healthcare is still evolving. So if you wanted to incorporate additional data from additional tables from external data or internal data, or add additional columns to the existing data model, you're fully free to do so. So that's the beauty of it, is you're not locked into how we initially define our data model, but you gain the benefit and expertise of how we've deployed it a number of times over the course of 13-year period. So before I start, any questions conceptually as to what Catalyst is?
No.
Okay. So we, aside from having expertise in terms of understanding how a hospital operates and functions and makes money or loses money, we have the skill sets to support your implementation. So we have folks who have experience in terms of deployment, user education, and rolling out the tool, understanding how to do more customized things, etc. So the whole package essentially is available to you in terms of our expertise. But we provide our solution in two different flavors. According to Gartner, which is an industry-recognized leader in terms of evaluating BI tool sets, Tableau and Oracle are in the leaders quadrant. So we've built our solution Catalyst in both of those flavors. And whichever one is right for you depends on your particular scenario. Are you going to eventually roll out to hundreds or thousands of users, or dozens or hundreds of users? And what are the bells and whistles that ultimately are on your ideal roadmap? So we work with you to determine which is the right solution for you, but we've effectively built the tool set in both flavors. So I'm going to jump into the demo right now. Any questions for me at this point? We good? Mm-hmm. So what I've got here is was there a question? I'm sorry?
No,
okay.
We said no, there's no question.
Okay, sorry. What I've got here is what Brendan showed before, the balanced scorecard approach. We have financial dashboards, operational dashboards, quality, staffing, productivity, a suite around emergency department, and then core measures. So let me just jump into one of those dashboards and just sort of walk you through the functionality, the content, and sort of give you the idea in terms of what is in the realm of capability for your users when you deploy this. So we chose Oracle and Tableau because they're best-in-breed BI tool sets. So this is an example of the Tableau dashboard I'm demoing for you right here, for instance. And at the very top of the screen, your users have a bunch of parameters, right? They can specify, for instance, what product line do I want to see? So the intent is to have a single version of the truth and to not have 40 different versions of profitability at the patient level, for instance. Really, we really want one version of the truth, highly parameterized, so your users can come in and whatever their roles are in the organization, they can look at the specific slice of the pie that they are accountable to. So for instance, if I'm in charge of a particular hospital and I have a multi-hospital operation, I can pick and choose my particular hospital. If I'm the chief of surgery of orthopedics, I may choose my orthopedic product lines, etc. So let's just look at my orthopedic patients for 2010, for instance. This is all sample data, but effectively when we implement, this is exactly how you'll see the data. So at the very top, I'm trying to understand profitability, and I have here a scatter plot. And the red, so the color represents profitability. The deeper green it is, the more profitable it was. So on the bottom axis, the x-axis, I have my net margin, which is my payments minus my direct costs. And on my left-hand or y-axis, I have total charges. So here I have a particular patient. If I mouse over them, I can see who the patient was, who the physician was, Dr. Crabtree, the respective length of stay, what was the DRG. I can see that it made $11,444 profit on $81,000 in charges, for instance, for DRG 304. So as I interact with the data, as I mouse over the data, I can see information right in place. Additionally, you can see I have shapes, right? So the shapes also denote something. Aside from the color, the shapes mean something. So here I have a field selector, and I have it set to financial class. So for instance, if I wanted to look at my Medicaid patients, right, I can go over to the legend and I can highlight Medicaid, and you see those pop out, and everything else fades to the back. So I can see that I had one Medicaid patient where I lost money, and it was a hip joint replacement. It was for Dr. Galloway. Length of stay was 13 days. But I can see the majority of my patients, my Medicaid patients who are orthopedic surgical patients, I made money on those particular cases. So you can see there's a high level of interactivity in terms of the parameters which you could use, as well as what we call the field selector. So let's say, for instance, I'm not necessarily interested in looking at the shape by financial class, but instead I want the shape to be the individual DRGs. Right? So this allows your users to go in and let's say I just want to look at DRG 308. I can now make those pop out. Whereas before I was looking at certain financial classes like Medicaid, for instance. Here I've totally flipped the data on its side because my intent is to understand which orthopedic surgical DRGs do I tend to make or lose money on. So you can see as I have it set to DRG 308 here, it changes the shape here and I can make those pop out. And it also affects the table below. So I see here a summary of whatever the desired field I chose was. So all of my encounters, my average length of stay, direct costs, charges, and profitability per case. So for DRG 308, on average, I made $2,235 per case. So that pops out when I choose that, and you can see the interaction with the data there on the fly. And so really it's a best-in-breed tool set where I can understand very quickly, slice and dice my data and understand where I have opportunities. I can look at it by DRG. I can look at it by physician. I can say, let me see, for instance, Dr. Barbie, for instance, and I can see Dr. Barbie had 2 cases. They were both profitable, that sort of thing. So highly interactive in terms of how we pre-built this. So you can tweak it and refine it or do, totally rebuild it if you wanted to, but the intent is to present data using visual best practices. If we want to tell the story of where we have profitable patients and then understand why and where, there's a lot of variables that come into play, like financial class, who the physician was, what the DRG was, et cetera. And so we give you the ability to understand the data from that perspective. Another example here is, let's say I have these 2 outliers here. If I just lasso them, you'll see that this bottom, these 2 patients in the bottom table, I have more information about those 2 specific patients. So I have the ability to interact with the data and lasso data, and I can see these 3 patients now. Or if I wanted to, I can drill down to the very granular detail, and I can see a lot of information about these underlying patients. So if I just click the underlying tab, for instance, I'm looking right into the data model now. And I've got, their zip code and all of the attributes that I capture on these patients are now accessible to me. So I can understand who these 3 unprofitable patients were. I can take this, export it to Excel, do whatever I want to do from there. But our intent is really not to have to export the data to Excel, but to allow your users to interact with the data in a highly analytical sort of manner without having to understand how to code and manipulate data, because the folks who you're looking to hold accountable tend to be more clinical in nature. They're not going to be your best in breed in terms of the best folks in data manipulation and Excel in your organization. You're really trying to hold everyone accountable to certain standards. So let me pause there. That's just an example of one of the dashboards. This is profitability by patient. You can see all the interactivity and capabilities there. That's the spirit by which we've built these dashboards, is to empower your users to be able to access and answer questions directly without having to say, hey, this is a great report, but can I see it this way or this way or this way? So any questions for me at this point?
I just have a quick
Sure.
question. Is there a way for you to make what we can see bigger?
Let's see.
You know what I mean, like larger?
I don't think so on my monitor with this WebEx. Is it hard to see on your end?
It is.
I see.
But that's okay. My next question would be...
Usually in a browser, if you have a browser, you might have the ability, see I'm in Internet Explorer here. Do you have a little zooming thing?
We're looking.
Some browsers have that.
Oh yeah, we're already, it's through the WebEx, so we can't.
Can't see it?
Generally, if you hit Control and plus, you can zoom in on almost any application.
So do you want to try that? See if hitting Control plus zooms in.
No, it didn't work.
Okay, that's fine.
Will you be sending the slides then?
Yes, Brendan can follow up with you in terms of
Okay.
sending some of the visuals. Because the beauty of this tool, it's highly visual. And so the intent really is to make it such that your users can interact with the data. So here's an example, for instance, of the same profitability data, but instead of understanding specific patient outliers, I'm looking to understand physicians. So I have Dr. Crabtree, and the size of the circle represents the number of encounters she had. And again, I'm still looking at orthopedic surgical patients. And so I can see the more rightward you are, the more profitable you are on average. And so she had a lot of volume, but is not the most profitable. She, about $1,600 per case as opposed to Dr. Bowers, who's about $2,900 per case, right? So I'm taking the same information and looking at it from a different perspective. So here I have physician groups. So if I highlight, this is a particular physician group, if I highlight physician group 28, for instance, the three physicians in that group pop, right, in the chart above it. And then over to the right, I can see for that particular physician group, the trend of their discharges over time as well as their profitability per case. And so I can see how, this particular group, physician group 13, the profitability per case is eroding over time, even though their volume of discharges is increasing, for instance, that sort of thing. So the intent really is to be highly interactive and let your users look at that information in place. So is there anyone have any specific content they wanted to see? It may be hard for you to see my screen. We have financial metrics, operational, emergency department, etc. Anything specific, or I can just jump to any random dashboard if you'd like.
I think anything. No one's
Sure.
saying anything here, so probably random.
Sure. So for instance, here's an emergency department dashboard. So we want to understand when patients are arriving in our ED, for instance, right? So I have this little heat map, and this heat map tells me that 11 a.m. on Monday is my busiest time in terms of patient arrivals. So I can quickly understand for any slice of data, when the busiest time is. And I can highlight, that little cell there, for instance, which is Monday at 11 a.m., and I can see all of the Mondays, so just the Mondays, and how they vary over the course of the year in terms of patient volume. So just highlighting that lets me see just the Mondays, and I can see where my peaks and troughs are as the year progresses. So again, the intent is to be highly interactive, and so I can quickly see, again, my busiest Mondays as the year progresses, etc. We look at quality within the ED in terms of why patients are coming and what reasons they're coming for and how we're disposing of the patients. For those patients who expire in the ED, what were the primary diagnoses? Geographically, where my ED patients are coming from, so a bit of a heat map. And to understand, where patients are coming from, as well as throughput, arrival to triage, to when the triage process is completed, to when they're assigned a bed. What are those bottlenecks? And I can look at it for specific physicians. I can look at it for certain case acuities, just the red or just the blues. And then these are individual patients. And what is their time to traverse through the ED? And what was the reason they were there for, and the color represents their acuity. So a lot of highly interactive data, obviously. I'll just jump to some other random dashboards. So this is looking at mortality rate over time, right? So we obviously want to understand profitability from a financial perspective where we have opportunities, but also from a quality perspective, understand readmissions, mortality. So this is looking at mortality over time. And again, I'm just looking at my slice of the pie that I care about, orthopedic surgical. So how many patients do I have in this particular date range, and how many of them expired, and what's my expiration date over time, my expiration rate over time, and my expirations by severity of illness. So why do I have a patient with the low severity of illness who died? And what was their respective insurance plan, and a lot of good ways to visualize that data. Here's readmissions data, right? So readmissions traditionally was a quality metric. It now has financial implications. So understanding why you have readmissions, right? So I'm looking again at just orthopedic surgical patients, and I can understand, that this is the gap between when they were discharged to when they were readmitted. So 0 to 30 days, I can see the majority of the patients come back within, say a 7-day period here, for instance, right? So understanding the nature of these patients who get readmitted may mean I change processes and protocols in a different manner than patients who come back, say, day 25, right? So understanding the root causes of why patients are coming back is important too. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution in terms of fixing readmissions. It really depends on the nursing unit that's doing the discharge. Sometimes it depends on the physicians that are doing the discharge. Obviously, it depends on the product line. It depends on where you're discharging to. Are they going home? Are they going home with services? Are they going to a nursing unit, a nursing home, a skilled nursing facility, etc.? So a lot of that plays a role, and understanding all of those attributes is obviously very important when we're talking about trying to reduce certain metrics such as readmissions. If you reduce your readmissions or you reduce your length of stay, for instance, by a fraction, your data strategy is more than paid for. So it's important to understand that this is really a full balanced scorecard approach, a compendium of metrics where if you just addressed one or two of these metrics, you would pay for the resources it requires to pay someone, your DBA and to pay for the software, et cetera, because you have a lot of opportunity there to reduce mortalities, to reduce complication rates, and thus reduce length of stay, to understand why you have overtime and manage that appropriately to reduce unnecessary overtime, et cetera. So that's there's way too much content, obviously, to talk about in a 1 hour time frame. But essentially, what I wanted to convey was, number one, there's a broad range of content because this is really intended to be a balanced scorecard approach. And secondly, we've built it in tool sets which are highly interactive. You want to empower your users to be able to ask and answer their questions directly without having to call decision support or business intelligence or finance or whomever is accountable in your organization. So that's my sort of glimpse into Catalyst and how it works. And so any questions for me?
No, I think if we just get the slides,
Sure.
and we could take a look at some of the categories. Looks like a pretty diverse array of subjects that you've got on the scoreboard.
Yeah, we really wanted to hit all the major factors. So I know it's hard to read, but I'll read off a few, just so you're aware. Profitability obviously is key. No margin, no mission. So we have two dashboards that focus just on profitability from the patient perspective as well as a physician perspective. And then if you think in terms of profitability and what drives that, you have top-line revenue, right? And so we have dashboards around case mix and payer mix. So understanding, if I increase my orthopedic surgical patients, does that improve profitability in general or not? Well, are you doing more hip replacements or are you doing more elbow surgeries, right? And what is the mix of those patients that are coming in the door? If they're more Medicaid and less Blue Cross, for instance, that obviously has implications on your margin. So understanding the top line drivers of profitability as well as the bottom line drivers, length of stay, resource utilization. Do you have certain physicians that are using more tests than others, right? Are they using the Rolls-Royce of hips instead of, the Chevy Nova of hips? All of those types of questions in terms of understanding what affects the bottom line. So we have dashboards around those metrics, around room utilization and understanding when you have bottlenecks and understanding the staffing patterns around your nursing units, and then productivity around those nursing units. So if you have to maintain certain nurse-to-patient ratios, when do you have a favorable variance where you're understaffed, and where do you have an unfavorable variance where you're overstaffed? And what does that translate to in terms of cost? Because we have all of your salary information for all the people who are clocked in, et cetera. Then we have quality measures around readmissions, mortality rate, complications. Complications are important because they often extend your length of stay. So if you're being paid for on a DRG basis, for instance, and you have someone in-house 5 days versus 15 days, it's a lot cheaper to take care of the person in-house for 5 days than 15 days. So understanding complications and whether they were present on admission or not, that's obviously important. So we're really talking about, all of my conversations as I was in this role what are those key metrics that a healthcare organization wants to focus on, right? And that's where we expended our energy. Understanding the ED, because the ED obviously is a conduit for how you admit patients, and typically inpatient discharges tend to be more profitable than outpatient encounters, right? So what are the bottlenecks in the ED? When are patients coming? What are the, where are the quality defects and why are patients leaving without being seen in the ED, et cetera? So it's a very broad and diverse set of content, but that's really what we're trying to do is get one solution in place that's essentially the Holy Grail. All of your users go to one tool set. There's one common platform, one common reporting language. They all know how to get to the information that you want to hold them accountable to. So that's the objective. Any other questions for me?
I don't think so, not at this time.
Okay.
Dan, it's Brendan. The only thing I wanted to add and kind of circle back is that we're offering you insights, but the timeliness of the information is also worth analyzing, and being able to offer end users the ability to intervene on something that might be a cost overrun, that might be a length of stay that's out of the norm, that might be a lag in charge posting. I mean, lags in charge posting is an area where the emails start to fly after 2 to 3 weeks, and it can be bedlam. And as well, productivity, when we look at overstaffing, we like to look at variances to the target and see the cost of the variance and reset that variance to 0 by understanding every 4 hours the cost of your labor choice variances. So a lot of the tools value, going back to the value proposition, the data-driven value proposition, is the ability for you to intervene and take action and empower all users to be able to do so. So that's just sort of a summation, I guess, of what the tool is designed to help you and your staff do every single day.